You are awesome. Man, it's true. You're amazing. You're awesome. And I know that it's hard to believe sometimes, but the fact remains the same. You are awesome. And so I want you to say that with me really quick. Say, I am awesome, right? And here's the reason. It's not because of what you've done. It's because of what God's done. And you are loved by God, so therefore you're awesome. He loves you. He values you. You are His child, and that's what gives you your worth. Now, I know life can be difficult sometimes, and maybe you don't feel like you're loved by God, maybe because you've been through rejection. And actually, rejection is what we're going to talk about today. It hurts, it stings us, sometimes it holds us back from being the person we're supposed to be. But we want to teach you today that rejection can actually be a launching pad to grow into the person God has called you to be. So if you'll just hang out with us for the next few minutes, we'd love to give you some tips and tricks on how to overcome rejection. Check this out.
You know, there's really nothing as powerful in all humanity as the power of acceptance. We'll do almost anything to get people to accept us. And so we have this fear of not being accepted. And so we're talking about today about rejection, because that's the opposite of acceptance. And man, everybody struggles with rejection at one point or another. And I want to tell you today how you can not only accept the rejection, but you can move forward and overcome it, because that's a key that all of us need to understand, because every single person experiences rejection at some level all the time. You know, I can remember when I was younger and I loved playing basketball, and my dad never made it to any of my games, and because he was working hard and he was taking care of our family and trying to do the best that he could do. But I can remember coming home one evening and my dad said, "Hey, how'd the game go?" And I said, "Hey, it was a great game today." He said, "Well, how'd you do?" And I said, "Hey, I did pretty good, Dad. I had 18 points today. I had 11 rebounds. I had 3 assists." And my dad said, "Well, I'm gonna ask you something. How many fouls did you have today?" And I said, 3. And I thought he's gonna say that's great. And he said, "Well, it sounds to me like you had 2 more fouls to give. Sounds to me like you need to be more aggressive." And I was like, And he didn't mean it for me to feel it, rejecting. He was trying to coach me and say, "Hey, here's an opportunity. You did great, but here, do some more." But I interpreted that as rejection. And I can tell you that was a long time ago. I can remember having that conversation with my dad. I can tell you where I was standing in our home. I can tell you what he was wearing. I mean, I remember every detail of that conversation, because you know what? Rejection hurts. Rejection stings. It causes us pain. Sometimes it causes scars, and it's hard for us to sort of overcome that. And what I really want to help you with a little bit is how to overcome these disruptions in your life, because that's really what rejection is. It's like a disruption. Things are going great, then somebody says something, somebody doesn't say something, and all of a sudden you are just crushed. And it turns out that instead of it something that inflates you and encourages you, that rejection is very deflating, like a ball that's got no air. And so what I want to do is I want to show you how you can bounce back, how you can handle being crushed by a rejection, how to change your life so that you can bounce back, because you know what? Rejection's coming. And like, hey, how about some exciting news, Arthur? How about something encouraging? You know, on that note, why not tell us that the world's going to end tomorrow? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the reality is that we're going to have to deal with rejection. And rejection can wreck us emotionally and physically. You know, that's why sometimes something happens and somebody says something, somebody doesn't say something. You know, maybe you went through a divorce. Maybe one of your children ran away from home. Maybe you had to struggle with things in school. I mean, you studied so hard for that test, and you wanted to pull your grade from a C up to a B, and you made a 94 on that test, and you're thinking, hey, this is great. And you went home and say, hey, Mom, Dad, I made a 94, and so I'm gonna have a B in that class. And they said, well, if you'd worked harder, you could have had an A. And you're like, and you just feel crushed. And maybe it was something that happened with you a long time ago with your dad or with your mom or a sister or a brother, or maybe you were dating someone and everything just kind of blew up. And emotionally, it's hard to handle. And even sometimes it causes physical problems for us. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, that's what sometimes somebody says, I feel so crushed right now. I don't even feel like I can breathe. And the emotions become so strong that it begins to physically impact us. And so what I want to do is show you that you can learn not only to bounce back, but I want to show you that we can learn to move forward and use the rejection that comes into our life as a launching pad to grow into the people that God wants us to be. So that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, about how we can not only bounce back, but we can move forward. Air ball!
Hi, my name's Luke Ayers, and I'm born and raised right here in Newnan, Georgia. Man, my story has changed a lot. I've done a lot in 10 years. I have been in ministry my whole life. I'm one of 8 kids, and my dad's a Southern Baptist pastor here in town. Wanted to, my whole life, be in ministry, so right out of high school, that's what I did. Got into ministry and started doing things at churches and camps and traveling the world, and really just did not feel like it was for me. I didn't feel that it was rewarding. It was just tiring, and I saw a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, a lot of confusion in the church world. So I decided that I was going to reject my calling into ministry and told God I'm just going to put that on hold for a little while, and maybe one day when I get rich and make a lot of money, I can give back to the community in some other way. So I started a business. My business grew, and then it grew again, and 3 years in, I was making more money than I knew what to do with, and we had a very successful events business and wedding business, and life was great on paper and on Facebook, and my heart was sick and my mind was stressed, and someone told me something that as long as I kept living in disobedience, I was never going to be happy. And then I started getting some advice, and I got a counselor. I was really stressing out about a lot of things, and I heard a sentence that I'll never forget, and it was, "It's okay to not be okay." And when I heard that, because I kind of felt like I was told the opposite my whole life, like you got to get it together and pray about it and get your life together. But when I realized it was okay not to be okay, I realized I needed to refocus and what my life was about. My business, year 5, failed completely. I was completely rejected by some business partners and the business world. I don't know if it was a God thing or if it was just really bad decisions on my part. But it was hard. It was really hard. And I stepped away for a little while, and then my story changed. And I decided to stop rejecting what the Lord put inside of me as a 14-year-old boy. And it was to be a pastor, and it was to start a nonprofit. And fast forward a little while of after seeking lots of wisdom and guidance and redemption and grace from friends and family. I'm currently a full-time pastor. I'm running as the president of a multinational nonprofit, and I realized I did not have to go through all the things that I went through. I did not have to reject God's calling on my life, and I didn't have to always feel rejected from family and friends and relationships with women, and that was a lot of my own personal disobedience. And I realized where I'm at now, it's such a cool place to be able to help people before they go through some of the things that I went through, to really help them see that obedience immediately is so much easier and so much better, so much more joyful. And I've realized right now where I'm at, that's where I got to stick. Is if God says it, I can't reject it. I'm going to just stick with it, even if it's tough. And I've seen in the long haul, it's so much better for me. In your life ever is going through a time where you have rejected something that you know God has for you, or if you had a personal relationship with someone who's rejected you, God has a plan, and His plan is always better and in His timing. Don't feel lost, don't feel alone, that God's timing comes. But when you wait, that's the one thing I had to do. When you wait, God's plan starts to unfold.
So I guess you figured that when I took that shot a minute ago that it was going to cut net and it was going to look amazing because we were going to script it that way. But no, that was a straight up air ball. I was too far away, bad form, bad shot. I felt rejected. And sometimes the reason that we feel rejection is because it's something we have done to ourselves. But more often than not, we feel rejection. We feel the hurt, the pain, the anger, I want to get after it. I want to do something. We're deflated, defeated, and we feel that way because somebody did something to us or said something to us or didn't say something to us that we had these expectations that they were going to do. And you know, most of the time, conflict in relationships is a result of unmet expectations. And so I want to teach you a word. This is really important. And it has nothing to do with calculus if you ever did differential equations when you were in high school or college. But this word is differentiation. And what it means is that I can be connected to you, but that doesn't determine how I feel. I am not responsible for someone else's feelings. Someone else is not responsible for your feelings. And so we have this differentiation that says that my feelings are not dependent on how you treat me. Differentiation means that I have this understanding of who I am, that God created me, that God made me, that God is in charge, and that He is the one who teaches me and leads me to understand who I am. Now, most of us, we believe that there's a God and that He does something. And you might believe the Bible, you might not. And regardless, what I want to know is that you are willing to consider what God might have for you at a minimum. I hope you'll do that. I hope you understand that God wants the very best for you, and that you'll understand that that's what He wants to do for you, really more than almost anything else. So if you remember last week, we were talking about David and Goliath. Now, David and Goliath is this passage that's in the Bible, and whether you believe the Bible or not, people all around the world have heard the story of David and Goliath. And you remember I talked about that a little bit last week, and how David had this calling and this opportunity to go do something for God, and he said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And when he was obedient to what God told him to do, God followed through and showed David opportunity like he never had before. So you remember a little something about that. Now what happens is that David had been selected to do that by a guy named Samuel. Samuel's a prophet. And so Samuel goes to David's dad, whose name was Jesse, and says, hey, one of your sons is supposed to be the next king of Israel. Can you bring your sons out? So the first son he brings out is a guy named Eliab. And Eliab comes out, and Eliab, he is this strapping, strong, hairy-chested, get after it kind of man. And Samuel looks at him and goes, well, surely this is who's supposed to be the next king. But God tells Samuel the prophet, he says, no, this is not the one. This is not the one. And so Samuel says, no, you're not the one. Is there another? And so what happens is Eliab feels rejected by Samuel. And so a little time passes, David comes, David is chosen to be the next king, the little brother. And so some time passes, and remember there's this giant Goliath who shows up, 9 feet tall. I'm 6'3", so he's 3 feet taller than me. And Goliath is there. He's got 125 pounds of armor on his chest, like having a middle schooler strapped to his chest, right? And so he's there. He's got the point of his spear weighs 15 pounds. So strong guy, big guy, Goliath, giant. And Eliab is there with all the other armies of Israel, remember? And they're going to go to war against the Philistines and Goliath. And so David is sent by his father Jesse to go to the battle. and he goes up there, and here's what happens when Eliab, his big brother, who's there as part of the Israel armies, this is what his brother Eliab says to David in 1 Samuel chapter 17. He says this. Now, Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, "Why have you come down?" And notice he just demeans his little brother and just puts him down. I mean, there's no healing here. There's no, "Hey man, I'm sorry about it." And see, Eliab is passing on rejection to his little brother because he had experienced rejection. And that happens so often in families, doesn't it? A mom, a dad, a grandfather, an uncle, an aunt, a sister, a brother has experienced rejection. And so because they feel hurt, they pass it on to someone else rather than stopping the cycle of rejection. Maybe that has happened to you. But Eliab is not, "Hey, let's be friends, let's be best buds." But instead he says, "You know what? I'm going to pass on this rejection." And he says, "Why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness?" I mean, David's a shepherd, but he says, "Look, you're not all that. You just got a few little sheep you take care of for our dad. You're not all that." And then he goes back and he says this. He says, "I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." And David said, "What have I done now? Was it not but a word?" And he turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way. And the people answered him as before. And so David is there being obedient to God, but he is experiencing rejection on a grand scale. And then a couple verses later, he goes and tells Saul, "Hey, I'm here to kill Goliath." And Saul goes, "Who are you? You're a boy. You're not a warrior. What do you know? How can you determine what to do and where to go and how things are going to be done next?" And here's the thing. David experienced rejection, but he says, "I'm going to bounce back and I'm going to move forward," because he could have two significant figures in his life, his big brother and the king of Israel said, "You're not qualified, get out of here." But he said, "I'm going to be obedient to what God has told me to do." But David's not the only person in the Bible that experienced rejection. In Isaiah 53, we find out that Jesus was despised and rejected. We find out in Mark chapter 8, verse 31, that Jesus tells the disciples, he said, "Listen, the leaders, the priests, they're going to reject me. The people are going to reject me. They're going to despise me." He says, "They're going to crucify me. They're going to turn out that I'm going to come back to life. That's what's going to happen." 3 days later, he says in Mark chapter 8. And so here's the thing to grab onto right here. It's really important. Once you're connected to God and you're in a relationship with him through his son Jesus, everybody else on the planet, everybody in the universe may reject you, but God will never, ever reject you. God accepts you no matter what once you're in that relationship with him.
I'm so glad that you're spending a few minutes of your time with us here today, learning about the topic of rejection. You know, God wants the very best for you, and it doesn't matter what our past looks like or how hard it's been. We can continue to move forward and grow into the person God wants us to be. Now, before we move any further in this video, I want to take a moment just to say we'd love to learn a little bit more about who you are and connect with you a little bit. And the easiest way to do that is just grab your cell phone and text the word CONNECT to 770-800-8622. That way we can begin kind of chatting back and forth. You'll be able to fill out a form, maybe have a prayer request. I know 2020 has turned out to be a crazy year, right? With COVID and all the stuff we're dealing with today. And maybe you need a little help. Maybe you need a little support. That's what the church is for, and we'd love to help and support you. You also can follow along on all of the social media platforms that we're on, which is Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And there you get a lot of updates from us and some daily inspiration as well. And we'd love to connect with you and learn more about who you are. So take a minute and do that. Text the word CONNECT to 770-800-8622. Now let's get on with the video.
You know, rejection, it feels like you've been excluded, like you're not allowed to play, like you can't be part of the game, like everybody else gets to do it, but you have to be a spectator, and you know, it's no fun. You know, that's why so many times that we look at rejection, and we've got to make this decision about, are we going to overcome the rejection, Are we going to work our way through it? Are we going to process it? Or are we just going to live a life of regret? Because sometimes rejection stomps on us so hard, we just feel like I can't do anything, and we miss the opportunities to live the life that God created us to live in the first place. You know, I can remember when my son was in 9th grade and he was going to school, and they had this thing where this big giant dodgeball tournament, right? And they asked him to be in charge of it and put everything together, build the brackets and all this. And it was a big deal. I mean, I don't know why, but it turned out to be a big deal. And I was asking him, I said, Jonathan, I said, so what does the first place team get? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you know, they got to have a trophy or something. And so a couple of days later, he came and found me and he said, hey, Dad, you know what? And I love this, see, because he took a giant risk. He could have gotten rejected. He said, I'm going to give the winning team a pound of bacon. And I said, bacon? Really? Bacon? And he said, yeah, I'm going to give them bacon. He said, who doesn't love bacon? And I was like, yeah, people love bacon, but you don't want that for a trophy. You want something to put on the shelf. And he said, no, I'm going to give them bacon. And here's the crazy thing about all that. The crazy thing about it is that years later, they still do this dodgeball tournament every year. You know what the first place team gets every year? A pound of bacon. And the guy who's the valedictorian or the girl who's the valedictorian of the high school every year, you know what they give them? A pound of bacon. I mean, I love it that he did something like that. And I love that he was willing to take a risk and maybe even get and experience some rejection. And you know what? I am so sad when I see that as adults that we lose our courage and we're so scared of being rejected or what people are going to think of us that it paralyzes us. Because remember, that's what we talked about a little bit last week, that basically what fear does is it paralyzes us. It keeps us from doing the things that God has set in front of us. And everybody's experienced rejection. I mean, big time people. I remember Einstein, he got rejected from being accepted to college. How about Walt Disney? Do you know that Walt Disney, his first job as a writer at the Kansas City Star, he got fired? How about Steve Jobs? He started this company, maybe you've heard of it, Apple. And the board fired him from the company he started. And then later on, they came back and they hired him and did all kinds of things that nobody imagined that they would be able to do. How about Oprah? You ever heard of her? Oprah. So Oprah shows up, right? And you know what she gets in trouble for? For being too emotional. I think she's kind of captured how to use emotion for her strength and for her advantage, don't you? So it's kind of interesting. But for us to move forward, we've got to do more than just bounce back. And we've got to say, I'm going to take some steps moving forward. I'm going to process my rejection so that the future is paved for me. That's what we've got to do. Let's process our rejection. Let's work through it so that we do more than just bounce back, but we're able to move forward into the future. Because here's our choices. When somebody hurts us, when we're rejected, we can retaliate and say, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. That's the reason a lot of violence, a lot of arguments in marriages and in homes and between friends and even terrorists are trying to retaliate because somebody hurt them. And so that's our first option, is that we can retaliate against the people who have hurt us and rejected us. The second thing that we can do is that we can say, I'll just retreat. And honestly, that's what a lot of people do. They say, you know what? I don't even want to try and mess with this. And they just go into a shell. And they miss out on so much. And that's not a great option either, because all you're doing is just burying the hurt instead of letting it come out. The third option is that you can redeem the rejection. What do I mean by that? You use the rejection. That's what it means to redeem something. I'm going to take something and I'm going to use it in exchange for what has happened to me. When somebody gives you a coupon, you redeem the coupon. They gave it to you. You redeem it for something for you. That's what redeem means. Because here's the truth. It's hard to hear, but it's true. Rejection can be a blessing. Rejection can be a blessing. Because what happens when you experience rejection is that I'm going to use this, and you look at it, and you know what rejection does? It reveals what's going on in our lives. Because that hurt, that pain, that struggle that you feel in those moments when you're first experiencing that rejection, it shows you what is really going on inside of you. That's why it's a blessing. It will reveal who is really with you and who is not. It will reveal who cares about you and who doesn't. It will reveal who is trying to use you to their advantage and who is not. It will reveal where your heart is and what you're attached to and what's important to you and what's not. Rejection can be a revealer. The other thing is that it ridicules. You'll see what happens when you experience rejection is some of the things you thought were really important, you'll go, oh man, that's really not so important anyway. I mean, I don't have to have that for people to accept me. I don't have to have the car. I don't have to have the title at work. I don't have to have the giant raise. I don't have to have the right kind of house. I don't have to wear the right kind of clothes. I don't have to have the right kind of walk and the right kind of talk. I don't have to have any of that stuff, because what it turns out is that is ridiculing what I thought was really important. And so rejection can be a blessing. So let's use it that way. Instead of being defeated and retreating or being angry and retaliating, let's redeem it. Let's use it. See, here's what happens every single time there's a relationship, something breaks up and something happens. Do you know God always has something better in store for you? When something gets taken out of your life, when somebody walks away from you, when something is no longer a part of your life, God always, not immediately sometimes, but He always gives you back something better than what you had in the first place. And you know what I love? I love that God accepts us no matter what. And if our relationship with Him is right, and we are listening to Him and walking with Him, and we have a relationship with Him through through His Son, Jesus Christ, He accepts you no matter what. And that is what you're looking for. You want to be accepted by people. I want to be accepted by people. It drives me. In Matthew 3, verse 16, Jesus has just been baptized. He comes up out of the water, and there's this voice from heaven. It's the Lord. I've never heard God speak to me in an audible voice, but that's what it says in the Bible, and so I believe that's what happened. It says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." Now, why had Jesus done at that point? He had just grown up. He hadn't done any miracles. He hadn't walked on water. He hadn't made the lame to walk or the blind to see. He hadn't called any disciples yet. He hadn't started teaching yet, hadn't done anything. But God looked at him and said, "This is my beloved Son." And that's what God does for you. He looks at you and says that you are loved and cherished, and He wants the very best for you. Will you put your trust in Him? He says in John 1, verse 12, He says that to everyone who calls on His name, that you will become one of His children. So what if today you were to determine, I'm going to put my trust in God because I want the acceptance that He offers, because I want to know that I'm accepted no matter what, even if everybody that I know rejects me. So I hope you'll say today, yes, I want the acceptance that only God offers me through a relationship with Him through His Son Jesus.
I'm so thankful for Arthur taking a few minutes to teach us about rejection and how to overcome it. It was so good and so timely, and we really hope you enjoyed it. But if you're on the other end of the screen, maybe you're saying, I still have questions. I still need help navigating through my specific situation. Or how do I move forward? Or maybe you got a question of, do I even have a relationship with God? How do I do that? If that's you, take a minute and send us an email at hello@southcrest.church. And one of the staff members here, we would love to connect with you and answer those questions over email. Or if you're in the South Atlanta area and you want to go grab a cup of coffee and have a conversation about how to become a follower of Christ and what does that mean, we would love that. We would absolutely love that. So send us an email again at hello@southcrest.church. But right now we're going to listen to a song by the band. It's called Canvas in the Clay. And I love this song. It's all about how God is molding us into the specific person He wants us to become. And there's a line in there that says, nothing will be wasted. I love that, because no matter if we faced rejection, He can use that to make us very uniquely exactly who He wants us to become, because He's the potter and we're the clay. So listen, check this song out, and we hope you tune in next week. We got another great episode for you. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, let us know, and have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
work together for my future and for my good. And you make all things work together for your glory and for your name. And there's a healing light just beyond the clouds. Though I walk through fire, I see clearly now. I know nothing has been wasted, no failure or mistake. You're an artist and a potter, I'm the canvas and the clay. And you make all things work together for my future and for my good. And you make all things work together for your glory and for your name. And when I doubt it, Lord, remind me I'm wonderfully made, 'cause you're